And now I can't think of another company that's ever done that. And that turned out to be the smartest thing we ever did.
Hello, and welcome to the Market Bull Podcast. Please note, topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial or investment advice. Paul Cronin is the Managing Director and CEO of Adriatic Metals, listed on the ASX, OTC and LTE exchanges. Adriatic Metals is developing world-class precious and base metal mining projects in the Balkans. Paul is a co-founder and along with his team has taken Adriatic Metals from an explorer to producer in a 5-year period, along with a very healthy share price increase. Paul discussed his professional history and why he fell in love with the Bosnian opportunity. Paul is big on company culture, and this is clear through the initiatives Adriatic Metals has established and its success it is having. Paul highlighted the projects at the company, the benefits they will have on the community, and what comes next. Here is Paul Cronin from Adriatic Metals.
So hello, I'm Ben Kostrich and this is the Market Bull Podcast. Joining me today on the show is Paul Cronin, the Managing Director and CEO of Adriatic Metals, which is listed on the ASX, OTC and LTE exchanges. You can look those lines up, but pretty much a global player. And he's joining me today speaking from Bosnia. So welcome to the show, Paul.
Thanks, Ben. Good to be here.
So for those that are not familiar with yourself, because the story of Adriatic Metals, it's had, well, really since you were the co-founder of it, an emphatic rise and really you could say a testament of success in the share price and just the discoveries that the company's made. But getting into, I guess, your backstory, how did you even come about this opportunity and therefore take on this almost, you could say, opportunity to really relish this new project?
Yeah, look, I was working for a resource investment fund in London called R&B, very successful fund. Been around for about 15 years and compound average returns around 40%. So hugely successful organisation. We'd made a number of investments in European mining over the years, and some of them had gone well and some of them not so well. But what we really started to notice, I think, from about 2011 onwards, and it was very much clearer when in the period of the Trump presidency campaign in 2015 and ultimately through 2016, was that global supply chains were going to be threatened a little bit. We'd seen Australia having its first sort of trade spats with China. Europe and the US were exchanging words about, how things were going to work. And you started to get the view that Europe was going to need to really look at its own supply chains. And that was clear during COVID, and then, has now become almost
A reality.
cast in stone after Ukraine. And we've now seen the launch of the EU Critical Minerals Act, which says Europe's got to produce 10% of what it uses. And we started to look around at assets in Europe and on the periphery of Europe. This asset was presented to us. It was presented to me by a friend and a colleague, Eric Demori, by a Bosnian Australian lawyer who had owned the asset since 2012, but wasn't able to take it forward. Look, we looked at it. We looked at its potential as a restart operation. We looked at its potential for exploration, like both of those, and said, let's have a crack. Bosnia was obviously an unknown jurisdiction to us. But the more time I've spent here, the more you realise this is a great jurisdiction for junior exploration and mining.
Well, that's the whole emphatic rise that I noted since the listing in 2018, if I'm correct, to where it is now at, flirting over the $1 billion market cap, depending on certain weeks. And as we know, markets just shift dynamically very quickly these days. But I mean, if people are unfamiliar with Adriatic Metals, I mean, what is the company and I mean, what have been its priorities really since you founded it with your mate?
Yeah, look, it's been very much exploration focused. When we bought the assets, we came in, we did confirmation drilling on the historical resource. And that was great. It was, I think that's 7 million tonnes there at around 6% zinc equivalent. There was quite high deleterious in there as well. And we're like, okay, well, this could be a problem on selling those concentrates. But in parallel to that, we were also doing exploration on this area called Rapitsa. And The exploration Rapitza historically was quite limited. Drilling was very shallow. They were chasing a barite outcrop from surface. Barite's never really interested me, but we discovered some assay results from drill holes that were drilled in early 1992 and late 1991, so just before the commencement of the war in Bosnia, where the drill assay results were not returned until 2012 because they'd been stuck in a lab somewhere unpaid for. And those results showed very, very high grade gold, silver, and copper. And we're like, okay, this is interesting. And then we started to map it all out, and we said, right, this is where we're going to drill. And I chose the location for the first hole. And it hit 64 meters, I think, at about 35% zinc equivalent. And we had enough money to drill another 7 holes. 6 of those hit similar thick, high-grade intercepts. So, okay, there's an asset here. But, you're drilling on steep terrain. You've got to carve out tracks, pads, got to hire staff to do assays. Said, right, we're going to have to list the company. And so we listed it on the ASX. And we raised 10 million Aussie dollars. And with that, we drilled out our first resource. I think from memory, it was around 9 million tonnes at pretty high grade, grading around 17% zinc equivalent. And the project's sort of gone from there. But even during the course of that drilling in 2018, 2019, we were already switching our focus. So actually, this is actually already an economic deposit. And we haven't even scratched the surface here. We need to start really thinking about how we're going to take this forward. And we started our ESIA before we'd even put out a maiden resource. And now I can't think of another company that's ever done that. And that turned out to be the smartest thing we ever did. Because we really started to understand everything about our local community, the natural environment, the built-up environment, the fiscal environment, where people went to school, where they went to the doctor, how they funded their medication, how they got to school, got to work. If you needed a specialist, where did you go, blah, blah, blah. And we looked at the entire fabric of our local community and went, we can probably design a project that not only is sympathetic to that, but actually in discussions with all of those people, we found out a lot about what they actually wanted for their future and for their children in particular. And we then set about designing a project around, their future aspirations. And as we did that, and as we eventually presented, we did a full EBRD compliant ESIA. And as we presented that to the local communities, we started to realize they actually really like what we're talking about here and how we're going to do it. And so that was all being done whilst we're doing, scoping study, pre-feasibility, and eventually feasibility. But in that time, I think because we were, we're investing in young people in the town through giving them jobs and training them, we did what we said we were going to do. We developed trust, and we got a social license, and we've still got that social license, and that's enabled us to build the project forward. We then went to government and said, right, walk us through the permitting process, which I can tell you was just, confusing as hell to me.
As expected, really, yeah.
But we got ourselves a good group of lawyers, a good bunch of experienced staff who were just able to start walking us through that process. As it turned out, a lot of the work that we were doing anyway, internally, like the ESA or whatever, could be reused for the permitting applications and documentation support of that. But then we just needed to understand, the paperwork trails between the various levels of government, municipal, cantonal, entity and state. And we set ourselves a timeline for how we're going to do things, and we followed things up. we worked very cooperatively with government. If they said, no, we don't like the way you've done that, we want you to do this, we said, absolutely, sir, no problem. And off we went back and did it. And what we saw was that trust that we had from the local community started to turn into trust from the government as well, because we're a company that operates with integrity. We do things well. We're open and honest and transparent. And things started to really sort of move quite quickly. We had, the Prime Minister of Bosnia turned up one day and said, I've heard great things about you. What can I do to help? We started to get really positive feedback from government and positive interaction from government. And I think, the project's been able to move ahead very quickly from there. In parallel to all that, because, I love drilling. Just give me a drill rig.
Let me go at it.
Yeah, we've continued with that exploration, and we've doubled that resource as we put out in the July update. We've doubled the mine life as a result of that. That's now giving us an opportunity to say, hey, well, what does our balance sheet look like? We've fully funded. By the time we start producing cash flow at the end of this year, we'll still have about 50 US in the bank. We can probably start looking growth opportunities. We can grow organically through the drill bit, and we've been doing that very successfully. There'll be another resource update late this year, early next year, and you'll see how successful that's going. But we can also, we've got a little team in London now that just purely looks at potential acquisitions. Projects that might be shovel ready, projects that we can tweak and twist and get more value out of. And it's not easy building a development team. It's easy in Australia because there's just so many mining developments that occur. But in Europe, there's only been a few in the last decade. And building a development team is quite a challenge. But we've built one. We built a team of very young professionals that really know what they're doing. They brought the project in broadly online with budget, despite being in a hyperinflationary environment. They brought it in broadly on time, despite there being a war a couple of thousand kilometres away. And I've got to say, I'd be keen to roll them out again and do it again on the next project. There's some lessons we've learnt, and I think that early next year we'll sit down and we'll have an open session about what those lessons were and what we could have done better, how we do it differently. But ultimately, it's been very successful. So, we are very much looking forward to deploying that team onto the next project. At some point in 2024 or 2025. But we've got to produce cash first. So the challenge very much for us now is finish the build. We're in the last 6 weeks. We're nearly at the end. Finish that build. Hopefully get one of our South African suppliers to actually finish supplying what they were contracted to supply. And we'll fly that up here and we'll have everything ready to go for production in November. We see great potential in this asset here in Varish. We see the opportunity to optimize our current mine plan that we use for the DFS based on this new resource, to potentially expand the metal output from the plant. But more importantly, to give it a more consistent cash flow profile of sort of north of 250 million post-tax free cash flow for an extended period of time. That gives you then a really good platform for growth, and also maintain a return to shareholders at the same time. So that's where we're really focusing on now. And I'm dealing with little headaches every now and then.
As expected in your position.
Yeah. But nothing major. I just had a week off and I came back from holiday, and I normally go straight into the project director and I say to her, AT, what's what did you stuff up last week? And she said, you know what, everything's fine. I said, come on. Something went wrong. Something must have gone wrong. Well, tell me what went wrong. What can I fix? She said, well, nothing went wrong. Everything's on track. Everything's on schedules. Everything's happening. I felt almost redundant.
Well, again, that's
No,
the
no,
sort of
no,
role that
near
the
me.
MDs exhibit, is that you're constantly problem solving issues that are arising. And I mean, this is again proof of what Adriatic has accomplished, given that really what you've said you're going to do, you've gone out and done it. And I think in your position, the fact that you've built so much trust with the local communities and the government is really something that everyone wants to do. And you can see companies trying to do it, but it's so much harder than getting the actual results, as we're finding out across the globe. But I mean, zoning in on the projects, and it might be, again, given the stage that it's approaching now, we're near completion. Again, getting the Varish project up and running. I mean, if you're highlighting that whole story, even how you've gotten to where it is now, I mean, what was involved in really accelerating that and almost realizing, hey, we could be onto a winner here?
Look, I think it was dedication by management. We relocated to site. We moved to Bosnia. We all rented a big house. We lived in a big house up in town. We ate together. We worked together. And we committed to developing a local workforce that have turned out to be one of our best assets.
Mm.
If you want to try and pull off a project like this, I think I said once in an interview in London that someone asked me, why are you different from other companies who are building assets in Europe? And I said, well, because I'm not sitting on German Street sucking back on a crab linguine.
Fair description, yeah.
I live here. I live and breathe this asset. I speak to government every day. I speak to the community every day. I work with my staff continually on their professional work, but also a lot of their personal issues as well. They will bring to me. There is a really strong trust in this group, and we managed to build a great team. We've had some fantastic hires recently. Matt Hine come in as COO, Sanette Harley as head of HR, Sergei Smolovanov, or Beefy Stroganoff, as we like to call him here. It's in exploration, and they're now making a really big difference. Matt and Joel Ledra have got a great underground team operating with the contractor. The exploration guys are just pumped every day. They can't wait to go to work. They're delivering results, and they know it, and they've just been given a huge exploration budget for next year. So it is the people that's made the difference. Look, I'm a big shareholder in the company, and this is an important project to me. But it's not so much the financial returns that what's driving it. It's I think living in this little community and seeing the difficulties they have faced since 1995, and how the political class have sort of not really done the right things by the people. And you see these stories of kids just leaving as soon as they can. They leave the country. You start to feel like, do you know what?
I don't want to do something to help or leave a legacy.
Let's leave a bit of, see if we can create a positive legacy here. And I think in telling that story, that vision of what we wanted this company to be and how we wanted it to interact into both the local community, but the broader Bosnian economy, I think is now growing into, well, how does this company lead the European mining industry moving forward? Because we've done things pretty well here, and that's being noticed in other European governments. How do we lead that forward? And that's where it's sort of shifted to. And next month we'll have a strategy session with the whole team, and we'll go through what does 2024 and 2025 look like for us. And I think it's going to be enormously positive. There's a lot of enthusiasm for what we're doing. And it's not just about, getting tons out of the ground and producing containers of concentrate. It's about the sustainability program, our energy programs, where we're putting in, large solar energy plants in partnership with a group out of Oslo. these little things, these little projects are having a huge impact on people's lives here. The company wins a lot of accolades for it, but I think the staff are really motivated by it.
It is one of those interesting points you said about actually moving the whole team, pretty much going up and living in the flesh, in the area, in the community, because you almost get a feeling that you can get disconnected from the area that you're in if you're just flying out to survey the sites and going back home, because you don't immerse yourself in it every day. And I think that's one of the uniquenesses clearly at Adriatic Metals, is that you guys are in the flesh, you're seeing it all, and that's almost driving you to want to better the community. And you mentioned just then about some of the sustainability practices, and it almost makes sense because A, that's the direction that everyone wants to go in. It's beneficial for the world, but because you're living in there and you're in these communities, it's just a no-brainer to implement strategies to help them. So, I mean, what has the company really started focusing on, or shouldn't say started, has been doing to really elevate this community? I think I saw something on the website as well saying there's a key sort of pillar of the company focused on the sustainability front for these communities.
Yeah, look, I think the first thing we did was the Adriatic Foundation. When we looked at how government funding comes back into the local community, we could see gaps there, areas that the community said they need more funding for, such as education, healthcare, and environmental preservation. And we said, right, we're going to set up a charity that's going to do that. We created strong alignment with the community because I donated $250,000 of my personal shares in Adriatic into the foundation. That was then the source of the foundation's funding. Now, it's done a lot of good since then, and it will continue to do a lot of good. The second thing we looked at was healthcare for our staff. Now, we were the first employer in Bosnia to offer private health insurance for staff and their dependents. It's quite normal to see it for staff, but not the dependents. And the reason we did that is we wanted to have enough people with this private healthcare product that it would justify a private hospital to come and build a new clinic in the town. And they did. We incentivized them a little bit to come and do it. And then we got an insurance company to come in over the top and sort of help it. That's then created a healthcare product, not just for our staff and their families, but for the entire community, because you can take the equivalent of the Australian Medicare card and just tap it on the machine on the desk and you're done. That's meant that a lot of the elderly population in Barish, because it is an aging demographic, now have access to specialists that they would ordinarily have to travel 2 or 3 hours to go and see. And so these sort of little things, they're very small, but they've made a big difference in people's lives. And it's little things like just reparation of roads, reforestation. We have our I Love Varish garbage pickup day every year, where we all run around and clean up the rivers and make sure there's no plastic bottles or anything else in there polluting them. These things win you a lot of friends. It creates a culture within the company that says sustainability is at the core of everything we do. And if you go to our cafeteria, our staff cafeteria on site, I mean, sometimes it reminds me of a George Orwell movie where you've got this sort of messaging coming through and TVs all over the place around, not health and safety, obviously key, but we talk about sustainability. And we show videos in there of things like the tailings dam disasters in Brazil, because we want people to know that these are real risks that we need them to think about all the time in both our operations and the way we work within our community and our natural environment. It's shifting the way the mindset is around mining to, sustainability. Not getting that right is a cost. It's an expensive cost to me. We're seeing legislation evolve that way anyway. The banks are definitely pushing us that way. You've got to start shifting that thinking right to the very beginning, to your geologists who are out collecting rock chip samples and soil samples, all the way to the guy who's managing your backfilling your tailings facility. If you can build that mindset into your staff and your workforce and the culture of the organization in a European context, you'll be successful.
Far out. And I mean, you mentioned before, again, given the aging population and almost the traditional community or even the people there, when they hit a certain age, they'd be wanting to leave. And that isn't really great from an economic point of view. But I can imagine that given the Adriatic's how would you say, just involvement within these groups now that there's almost this enticement for them to stay and work or upskill and learn. So, I mean, going forward, as this project naturally continues to increase and there's more and more development and, I should say, just getting bigger and bigger, I mean, what could this potentially do for all the people there in regards to the younger ones coming up and looking for opportunities?
Well, look, we sort of had this pitch because working here is not a hardship post, right? I mean, I'm 2.5 hours from the most beautiful coastline in the world. I'm 25 minutes from great ski resorts. The food is great. Everything's reasonably cheap.
Mm.
And I can jump on a plane to almost any European capital, any time of the day. This is not a bad place to work. But what we say to people is, we can put you through programs. We're going to develop your skills. We partner with other mining companies to allow our staff to go there and do a week's work experience or 2 weeks work experience to see how they do things. And they come back with better ideas. What we have tried to say to people is the lifestyle that you love, this Western Balkan lifestyle, which is so awesome. It just reminds me of Australia so much, where you work to live, you don't live to work. If you want to enjoy those benefits of going out with your family and having a barbecue by the river on a Sunday afternoon, or you want to go skiing on the weekend or go down to the coast for a swim, you've got the opportunity to do that. Your skill set will evolve and your salaries will evolve with it. But we're now starting to put in really long-term incentives for our staff, for everybody, not just the senior management, no, right through the company. We're just working through the tax implications of that at the moment. But that's going to mean that these people stay with us. We're also saying to them, in 2024 or 2025, there may be another development project somewhere else in Europe. We want you to stay with the company. We'll go and give you experience of working in Finland,
different area, different jurisdiction,
Spain, wherever.
Yeah.
We will give you that experience and you will be, much better for it. It's that investment in their personal development that people are committing to. And then, of course, we're now targeting the diaspora. So we have recruiters in Perth who are looking up anyone whose name ends in IC and saying, where are you from? So we've now got guys who are, who are Croat or Bosnian by background who are saying, I get to go and do a drive-in, drive-out contract rather than a fly-in, fly-out contract. And it's awesome. I get to see my parents every second weekend. So, that's been really successful. And, we don't see, Bosnia's probably got some of the lowest wages in Europe. We don't see the benefit in paying low wages in terms of our broader, longer term strategy. We want to pay well. We recognize we'll pay people based on experience or the market is, but we pay well because we want to keep our people. They're investing a lot of money in them.
I can see why it's had so much success, and this is all again about the company culture without even highlighting the results that you've got, because the primary projects that you've got have just been elevating in scope and scale. So if you're running through both of them quite quickly, because we've gone very much deep into the culture of the company, which I think is, well, arguably almost a selling point for me now. The projects themselves, and what other commodities there? You mentioned gold, copper, silver, and zinc. How do they feed into this? As you mentioned, the EU strategies that they'll start to be implementing. As we said before we started, Bosnia trying to get into the EU as well. There's a lot of tailwinds for the commodity side of it and the opportunities there. So what are you specifically targeting in these projects?
Yeah, look, we've got an array of different commodities in there. Antimony is also a key one, as is barite.
What are they used for?
Barite is used, for two purposes. One is for oil and gas production, because it acts as a blowout preventer because it's very dense. The other is it's used in industrial paints. It's used in medicines. You may have heard about the barium drink that you drink and they follow it down your digestive system.
Yeah,
things like that. Then you've also got uses in high density materials such as brake pads and whatnot in the automotive industry. So, and then antimony, it's used in alloys. So there's a lot of demand for that. China is the primary market for antimony, and yet it's at the top of every country's critical minerals.
Mm.
Silver is becoming increasingly in demand because of solar
Yep.
panels and high velocity electric vehicle charging. It's the most conductive metal on earth, and it's also one of the most malleable. It's perfect for high conductivity industries. So EV charging being one. So we're seeing those metals really start to come to the fore. In addition to that, yes, we're producing copper, we're producing zinc, we're producing lead. Lead prices are actually quite elevated at the moment, despite it probably being the most boring metal ever. Zinc's in the toilet a bit because of China, but it'll come back. Silver's doing really well. Gold's doing great. So we've got ourselves a small
Quite a nice spread.
of metals here that acts as a natural hedge around economic cycles, which is, when you're thinking long term, you'll see 4, maybe 5 economic cycles through a 20-year mine life. You want to make sure you can ride your way through each of them.
Yeah, well, and that's what we've noticed more so over the past couple of years, at least. I think a lot of investors and just people following the news have been a lot more attuned to commodity cycles and some of the sporadic ups and downs associated with them. Because, I've spoken in detail about silver with other guests and the demand, again, you think of silver, you just think of currency, but that has completely shifted now towards solar panels and charging for infrastructure. And it's almost, again, another one of these commodities that there's been such a lack of development and even, looking for it just because the prices weren't, rewarding enough. And now there's suddenly this urgency because, well, all of a sudden it's required for this EV revolution. But, well, hey, we're 15, 10 years behind being where we need to be. And that's, again, from your smorgasbord, as you called it, you've got a whole host of minerals that are really in that mix of we're needing them more and more so every day. And that's why I asked you to explain those first two, because I'd never heard of them, but I know they're the ones that people will eventually start to come familiar with because when we use them every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've got our offtake agreements now with Boliden, Glencore, Trafigura, Transmine. We still held a little bit back for spot sales, but I think we're in pretty good shape to get that revenue line looking as good as it can possibly be.
And I mean, going forward now, looking for the next 6 to 12 months, I mean, you've recently done a capital raise, or at least I should say this year, to, again, make sure the books, but you were saying before, you're hoping to be pretty much operating on your own once this is all up and running. I mean, what is the next 6 to 12 months looking like for Adriatic Metals?
Oh, look, I think, we're going to complete the plant construction over the next 2 months. We'll have a ramp up over the following 4 months, expecting to hit nameplate capacity in April next year. At that point, the Rapitza cash machine starts really turning it out. And then we're going to start thinking about what we do with it all. Certainly capital allocation is on the agenda for our strategy meeting later this month. But we see great potential for acquisitions of shovel-ready projects. And I think we've just got to try and get the right balance for our shareholders who want to see growth, shareholders who want to see income. We've got to try and manage that. And, I think the beauty of having such a diverse array of shareholders, from big income funds in the UK to growth funds in Australia and the US, means that we can probably get that balance right. And I think, the challenge now is lower the cost of capital. We need to refinance our original project financing into something that's lower cost. We need to get the balance sheet ready for a growth phase. There's some tremendous opportunities out there at the moment for a company that has the culture and the skill set that we have internally. So it's going to be a pretty busy year next year for us. I think it'll be a good one for shareholders as well. I'm quite sure about that.
Yeah, again, when I discovered it, I can say naivety. There's so many companies out there, but I sort of went, "Geez, how have I missed this?" And I think that's one of the points we said before. It's almost given where it's positioned. It's I wouldn't say difficult, but you wouldn't necessarily associate Bosnia with mining, or at least if you've got your boots in Australia or if you're in the US, you wouldn't necessarily see it. So for listeners that are how to say, like myself, that are engaged now in the story and what could potentially happen with the company, where can they go and how can they stay attuned to what the developments are?
Well, look, the best place is following us on social media. I mean, we're very active on social media and saying what we're up to and what we're doing. Um, but certainly, there's quite a bit of press about the company. Our ASX releases come out quite frequently. We do a lot more than just quarterly updates to our shareholders because there's so much activity going on. We like to keep people abreast of that. We'll be at certain conferences over the next 12 months as well. Not a lot, but a few. But I think there's plenty of opportunity to follow it. And look, the one thing we've always done, from even before we listed on the ASX, was we've always allowed our retail shareholders in particular to just pick up the phone to the company, pick up the phone to me. I talk to a number of our retail shareholders either through WhatsApp messages or phone calls, probably 4 or 5 times a week. I like their feedback. They're telling me what the market's thinking, and sometimes I have to adjust my messaging based on that thinking. Which you would have seen. We did that mid last year. The feedback we're getting was, inflation's running rampant in Europe and steel prices are double, blah blah blah, and they're going to run out of money. Well, we quickly showed people that we weren't.
In that
And that's
position.
when we started. Yeah, that's when we started to come out of that bottom part of the Lassonde curve.
No, fascinating. Again, when I was looking through it, the website is a great resource. There's a lot of stuff on there. And yeah, the socials are always a good spot. And I'm sure you'll be popping up on more podcasts like this in the future and just, keeping us updated with what's been going on. But yeah, thank you so much, Paul, for joining me on the show today because it's going to be an exciting next 12 onwards months for the company. And yeah, I'm excited to follow it and hopefully have you back on to discuss the updates and see what's been happening within Bosnia and the company.
Mate, I'd love to. Anytime. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Market Bull podcast. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow the Market Bull on our socials at Twitter and LinkedIn by searching The Market Bull. You can also subscribe to our newsletter on the website by visiting www.themarketbull.com.au.